Put your red shirt on and a brown coat too. Everybody's joining the crew. We got just one drink that we rule them all. Hopefully you'll remember your call. And your Ulu fingers and your middle gun. A sonic screwdriver or a sword plus one. Use the aliens you it will get you to hunt. To the big tank. To the big tank. The Rocky Mountain big tank.
I have to turn off the thing. Hi, I'm Guy.
Hi, I'm Troy.
Hi, I'm Chelsea.
And this is Geek Tank.
Your beef stock-sized podcast.
Yep. We'll edit that in post.
What thing did you have to turn off?
This.
Oh,
Yeah,
it doesn't auto go away.
it doesn't auto. You have to put everybody
I
back
put
up.
it on top of us so that in case for some reason, I don't know.
We're doing weird stuff like this.
Yeah. This is so I can edit.
Oh my
Yeah.
God,
No,
stop.
yeah,
You're going to give people seizures.
You
It's
might
your
get
birthday.
from our show-sized podcast. Okay. So, yeah, we were going to talk about
Stuff.
food. I don't know
So
why
many
we're
things.
for some reason. I don't know.
We're doing
Well, you
weird
wanted
stuff
to
like
mention
this.
stuff about the recent stock, and then we're also going to talk about food, hence the beef stock
Yeah.
size.
You're gonna give people
Podcast.
seizures.
We'll edit it in post-size podcast. Okay, so so we did want to talk about GameStop because that's a geeky thing and it's a big thing and it's happening. So we want to at least start there and at least address it.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
many
So
things.
the why of or the what it was that GameStop. There was a bunch of hedge fund companies that were doing a thing that's legal, technically speaking, but it is not actually like a good thing, where they would somehow buy and trade stocks in a way that it really isn't like anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, being ambiguous about this subject that is very, very specific is not a good plan.
Well, like I said, I've got this thing that explains it very well. Somebody else who explained it, and I could read it verbatim, like I read it to you guys.
Yeah, well, they'll just want to look up. They'll just want to look up what short stock and short
Yeah,
sales.
you need to look up what a short stock is. Troy had a very good question as to why you do that, and I think the answer really is.
But for the people buying it, you make money. For the people you basically borrow it, it drops in price. You sold it at the time of borrowing it. After it drops in price, you buy it back for cheaper than you sold it for. Then you give it back because you borrowed it. So the question I was wondering is, what's the benefit to the person who loaned it? Because couldn't they have just sold it anyway? And
Yeah,
so
I think that's a function. I don't think that. I think that's the function that Reddit was trying.
Is it a Apple's feature?
It's basically there's things in place that if I had stock to loan to you, if you wanted to do this, the benefit to me would be, well, for one, I'm betting on it dropping in price too. So I'm not going to necessarily get any money if it just drops in price and then I sell it.
Okay.
But if I give it to you, I get a fee paid and a percentage of whatever you make. However, usually if I give it to you and it goes up, there is no percentage that I have to worry about because you're now going to have to give it back to me, and it's going to be worth more now than when I gave it to you. So it's basically very little risk to the person loaning it. More of the risk goes to the person taking it. And so you tend to do that when you know something's going to drop, otherwise, or when you're pretty darn sure. And since GameStop was doing pretty bad, people are like, oh, let's do this with GameStop because it's doing really bad. Price is going to drop. And I forget the exact numbers, but I think it was going to drop from something like $10 a share down to like $1 to 50 cents a share.
Yeah,
So
it was really cheap.
huge drop. So when it dropped all the way down to there, a bunch of people on Reddit had organized that aren't normally the people that you would expect to be doing stock shells, and bought tons of GameStop stock, which drove the price way up. If you were one of those people who borrowed it at $10, a bunch of stocks at $10 and sold it when it was 50 cents, or I mean, you were planning on buying it back when it was 50 cents, but you missed your opportunity it had now shot up to like $400 a stock or something.
Yeah, I was
So
looking at it.
you bought
It was
it-
at like
you bought it for $10,
284.
And there's
And
a time limit.
that's called a short squeeze when that happens. And so what happens then is you have to give it back because you borrowed the stock, which means that you must sell the stock out on the market or you must buy the stock at the market at whatever it is now. And since they put a short squeeze on it, it went from whatever it was, $10 to $400. You just lost $390 per share.
Per stock.
Right, per share. So it drove a number of those hedge fund companies out of business. The thing about hedge funds is it's exploiting a loophole in the stock market, whereby you can pull stocks out, trade them, and then give them back.
Mm-hmm.
This weird little like trade, and then get millions of dollars.
My confusion though was I thought that hedge funds were borrowing stocks that technically weren't theirs, but were their clients essentially.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I had heard, I was like,
I think that might be what Troy is talking about too. Is here I am the hedge fund manager of whatever, and we're holding Troy's stock for it because that's what we do.
yeah.
And since Troy's not doing anything with his stock, I'm going to trade it on the market every day and make money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really what's happening.
But you do have
Troy
to have,
has no knowledge of what's going on. So Troy knows not. Yeah, here we'll just
you do have to. It is a thing though, where if I hire a guy as my stock manager, there's like a box or something you check saying yes, you can do this.
right.
Mhm.
So it's not like
Permission.
doing it without my permission.
Right, but so what they're doing is they're trading Troy's stocks. Well, they sold Troy's stocks on the stock market this morning in order to buy them back tonight.
Yeah.
If they don't buy them back by tonight and Troy wants to trade those stocks tomorrow, then they don't actually have them, and they have to go to him and say, "We're sorry, we sold your money. We sold your stocks. Well, we're sorry."
Stocks are liquid money, basically.
Right.
That's the easiest way to explain it.
Right. So I think what's happening here is that they have to buy those stocks back by tonight. Otherwise, Troy could trade them tomorrow and stuff like that. So they can't just say, "I'm sorry, I know you had 500 shares in GameStop, but we sold them all last night." And then somebody tried to manipulate it and we couldn't buy them back. So you only have one share left. Sorry.
It's not even that they could buy them. They couldn't buy them back. Like the problem was that the hedge funds were then locking down everything.
Yeah.
So you couldn't trade on the free market.
The apps were doing it.
So
Right.
like Robinhood, for example, which is owned by a hedge fund. Everybody should know that it's owned by a hedge fund. A lot of people thought it was like for the small people, just the everyday kind of consumer who just wants to get into it a little bit, make a little bit of money if they can understand the risk, right? Because it's been marketed to me a lot on YouTube, actually, because the Philip DeFranco show is a pretty big Robinhood sponsored program. Not anymore. Philly has said, "Screw you, Robinhood. You are not allowed to do anything on my channel ever again. You can GTFO. I've traded all my stocks somewhere else, and I refuse to use your services. And if people ask me what I recommend, I will tell them not you." So they've rightfully pissed off a lot of people, but Robinhood specifically blocked off like trading. You couldn't buy any more stocks. There was a glitch. I'm sorry. There was a glitch. And you weren't able to buy stocks in GameStop. You could only trade until the stock market closed.
They actually
And
made
then the glitch fixed itself.
And then they made a post saying, "We've locked these down for your safety."
Right. Safety.
Yes, wink, wink. And I was following somebody who was using Robinhood on Facebook, and they were posting other places that you still could buy certain things from. Because like AMC got locked out on Robinhood, but I think it was like E-Trader or something else was still selling it. So they were like quickly saying, "Quick, you can go over here and buy it," even though you can't buy it here.
It was also like Bed Bath and Beyond as well, wasn't it? There are a couple.
There's a
couple
few.
of them, right? Because the whole point was to make a point to the hedge funds, like, you shouldn't be doing this, and they were like, "No, it's fine." And Reddit was like, "Okay."
Right. Well, and that's
And I'll wait.
that's what's happening. That and this is where I say I've got a prediction now. Give it 2 months, and we'll be talking about there'll be two groups in our world, and one group will be saying, but it was group manipulation. And it was the whole point that Reddit was after here was not to manipulate the system. The whole point was to illustrate that other people have been manipulating the system. And as people keep intentionally telling me over and over and over, you can't just print more money. So the money has to come from somewhere. So when these hedge funds are pulling money out and putting it back in and pulling it out and putting it back in and making millions of dollars, that millions of dollars is coming from somewhere. And usually it's coming from these companies that are starting to struggle and they're starting to have problems anyway. And so they'll pull them out and put them in and pull them out and put them in, which just takes all of their capital out from underneath them. And then they just fold. So in other words, they're manipulating companies to fold.
Right.
And it's true that most of these companies are probably already folding. And so, because one could argue that GameStop has had some problems that have pretty much put it on the pathway to it'll be gone.
Well,
it's not going to make it much longer.
Yeah, and the big thing was they were hoping for a $75,000 payout or something like that. Like people who had risked money or hedge funds that had risked money would get a government bailout specifically for GameStop. And that's a problem right now when government handouts are few and far between, especially to, the economic people who need them, like frontline workers, maybe, the necessary evils.
Right. Well, and that's part of the problem is that our rich people have gotten rich off of playing the stock market.
Well, and now the common man is in there manipulating things.
And that makes them very upset because these guys have gotten very rich off of exploiting systems.
I can't smoke my big fat cigars if I don't have money. And I can't import whiskey from Scotland and Ireland.
All these undesirables are going to be able to afford our membership to our club now.
I can't go in a plane whenever I want and just ride around so that I can take a shit and enjoy the view. What will I do without my money?
Right.
Like,
and that's where the issue is. And
at the moment, both Donald Trump and AOC, Alexandria Cortez, are in agreement that this was a bad thing. We'll see how this is later.
But hang on, let me find this tweet.
Not that the bad thing being Robinhood locking everything out. That's the bad thing. Not the bad thing being that the system got manipulated.
No. But like I said, mark my words. In 2 months, there will be one camp that will say that this was all market manipulation by internet people who need to be controlled, and then there will be
I'm marking your words.
Marking my words. And then there will be another camp who will say, "Wait, that's not what happened." And we will have to go through this, and I'll bet you anything. For those of you who are joining us on this show because I told you to refer to this show, this is my I told you so.
He told you so.
Right here.
Where is it? Okay,
because this has happened with everything, that all these big events that have occurred in our lives, it's happened with all of them. The Black Lives Matter protests, the masks, the coronavirus. In the first week, we all agreed. Everybody agreed. Everybody thought this was a good idea. And then within 2 months, it was something, and I could never.
Impeachment was going to happen. And now it's Trump is a private citizen. I swear, just light your senators on fire and eat the rich. I know I've been saying that a lot lately, but
that's the whole reason he's supposed to be impeached.
As soon as I turned 30, I got grumpy. Okay, so here's
first for guys thing. I want to be able to. Everybody knows that this was recorded on January 1st. January 31st. So this is
January 31st.
It has not been edited. This is January 31st, 2021. Okay, now you can go ahead.
So AOC tweeted that this is unacceptable. We now need to know more about Robinhood app's decision to block retail investors from purchasing stock while hedge funds are freely able to trade the stock as they see fit. as a member of the Financial Services Committee, I'd support a hearing if necessary. And Ted Cruz, my least favorite Zodiac killer, if anybody gets that reference, welcome to Meme Town. Ted Cruz tweeted, fully agree, to which AOC came for this man in the most beautiful way that I've ever seen. She said, I'm happy to work with Republicans on the issue where there's common ground, but you almost had me murdered 3 weeks ago, so you can sit this one out. Happy to work with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed. In the meantime, if you want to help, you can resign.
She is done with him. She is so over him. So somebody had posted a post a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, said something to the effect of, why is it the Democrats are going for AOC? She's literally the tank of the party. She goes out there, she stands in front of everybody, becoming very loud and taking all of the arrows. She takes every arrow, she takes every sword, and she's like, you guys should be like, and so I had this image. So I started painting a painting of AOC now, like with a sword. And she's like, "Rah!"
We need this. I need this on my wall. Okay, so here's my problem, right? I don't get political on podcasts or on Facebook for that matter very often.
Right.
But AOC is a progressive, and the Democrats just cannot stomach that progressives run on their platform because they can't get elected anywhere else.
That's
Her, Bernie Sanders, other people as well, right? Now, here's the thing. For people who are time stamping things, remember when Bernie Sanders sued the Democratic National Convention because they nominated Hillary Clinton when he had won all the votes? Remember that? Does anybody remember that?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Do you know what happened with that lawsuit? The Democratic Party said, well, according to our bylaws, we can push out whatever candidate we want.
right.
Which is true.
So what's the point of the Democratic Party?
Illusion.
Exactly. So stop. We really have to be very specific when you talk about politics, especially right now, because AOC is the big progressive and she's fighting for a lot of issues and she's fighting across the table and she's actually getting things done compared to Democrats and Republicans sitting there having a little spit cat fight at each other because they can't even speak because they're
Right.
idiots.
Well,
So,
that's the thing. Like,
what do you do with your senators who can't talk to people, who start an insurrection and then cry about it, who can't get through a damn metal detector to go do their freaking jobs? You vote them out, or you light them in fire and then eat them.
But the first one's legal, second one's not.
I mean, just take your pick,
and
like at this
that's
point.
that's a thing that I get into arguments with all the time on the platforms is that for me, I have some very radical belief systems. I am a direct democracy fan. I believe that we could just get rid of our representatives altogether. Just go direct democracy. Use our phones. Vote every day. I believe that could happen.
It would be a lot, but maybe that could work. I don't know if it would work overnight.
Well, and
I'm
everybody's like, well, then
more
the
of a
lowest
fan
common
of-
denominator would be in charge. And I'm like the 535 that are in charge right now are not the lowest common denominator. Because I mean, really?
You have to remember that politics didn't used to be a job. It was a community service thing. And I know that we've outgrown that desperately, but that was the whole point of state versus federal government.
Yeah.
And something has gone terribly wrong, i.e. capitalism.
Well, the
I
further up it goes too.
Stop paying them so
and
much
I'm-
money
I'm
and stop
actually-
giving super PACs. Like, you have to follow your senators and see what they're doing, right? Like, I haven't checked in a while and I need to, because if the next voting cycle comes up and the senator from my district is sitting and slacking and spending more time trying to campaign than voting, sitting your butt in a damn seat and voting, bye-bye.
Right.
Go away.
Well, and I totally agree. I mean, and I quantify this. I'm actually a capitalist. I believe in democratic socialism. I'm with Bernie on this one. You know, you only put in socialism.
Socialism. I just want to see if it would work at this point. I just don't know how fast the turnaround could be or would be.
Well, I think that, first of all, I think we've seen, you know, what an extreme socialism is like, ends up being a communism. Nobody wants that. So we get
Nobody wants the communism.
Nobody wants communism. But I am getting kind of tired of having to routinely defend this. You know what I mean? I'm like, because as soon as I say I'm a democratic socialist, everybody's like, so you want everybody to have the same car? I'm like, no.
Oh, child.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, no. No, just any time that it's obvious that capitalism is letting greed run out of control, you put socialism in its place. That's the only thing. That's it. That's all. If your culture requires something, then the government has to give it to you. That's all. That's all. You know, that's where we're, you know, and
It's interesting. I'd have to
Well,
dive into that more.
Yeah, like public transportation. I mean, I think most people would agree that for the majority of people, getting from point A to point B by walking is impractical.
Mhm.
And
In the
but-
United States is hugely impractical, yes.
So there you would think, well, if you're going to have a job to make money, you need a way to get to the job. There should be some function in place, and there may be. I don't know if there's a government subsidized public transportation ticket that people can apply for and get in order to travel for free on public transportation.
Yeah, I don't
but
know of one.
I don't know because I've been trained to know that, well, when you ride the bus, you put the money in the thing and you ride the bus. If you don't have money, then you're walking. That's what I've been trained to. So I don't even know if there's another.
but that's a
system
good
in place.
example of something that's where the democratic socialists come in, and
Say, yeah, public
commentary,
transportation will be
like-
free.
Mhm.
so only the rich people can get to their work, and that's a problem in our society, and the government needs to fix that.
They're all sitting at
because-
home freshly vaccinated. So that's a big problem too.
Well, but I mean, you know, before we go off the rails on that one, because I agree with that one too. But
Rails. Public transportation.
But I mean, that's a good point. Or for that matter, if you need to have a college degree to get a decent job to make the bills to pay for your living wage,
Mhm.
and the college degree needs to be free or provided by the government. If that's a requirement in order to do it,
And we're getting steps towards that. Recently, I think I was reading that my student loan interest was frozen, and I was very confused. I was like, "What do you mean that the interest is frozen?" Like, they didn't charge me any student loans while I was unemployed, and I think they froze it for everybody, so nobody had to pay their student loan debt. But like, even with me making 30K a year, do you want to know what they recommended that I pay month to month would be with all my other expenses? They recommended to me that I only pay $17 a month. And I paid more than that. And I was basically just paying for interest. But supposedly Biden is looking at stopping the capitalism on student loan debt. So like, they're just going to cancel all the interest,
well, and
because that is
that
less
would-
dire than forgiving all the student loans, which sucks because I would love for them to forgive student loans.
well, and I have a
But
situation right
it's
now.
federal debt.
Yeah, my college was not. They let their certification lapse while I was there, so my college wasn't certified.
Oh my
So
god!
now I can't get a job anywhere where they check. As soon as they check my degree, they find out that my college wasn't certified, and I can't. So I tried to become a teacher, and I tried to get a teacher certificate,
Mhm.
but the Colorado Department of Education checked and said, "I'm sorry, but your college wasn't certified at the time." They were certified, by the way, like 5 years before and 3 years after I left. But during the time that I was there, they weren't certified. So my
Just
degree
during
is
that specific time. So they
during-
genuinely boned you.
Yeah. So I cannot get a job. As far as like anybody who actually checks my degree, I don't have a degree. But
That's
I
freaking
still owe
terrifying.
I still owe $65K, which is
No,
$500 a
they owe
month.
you $65K
And I
and a new
can't get
damn
it to clear.
degree.
I can't get it to clear. I
Never
went in
will.
and I tried to get it to stop, and I tried to get it to stop, and they decided under Betsy DeVos, they decided that I was still legally responsible for that $65,000, which is $500 a month for 10 years. That's a
Your-
car payment. That's
your-
2 car payments.
Your college, I can say your alma mater. It's not
Yeah.
quite your mom, but it's close enough. Your
Right,
alma mater.
exactly.
I will
Um,
say though, here you can die with your debt and you are absolved.
Death
So-
will get you
Well,
out.
and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just deferring it eternally until
Yeah.
I die. And
No.
then
I mean, I'm sorry, I had the same plan. Like, unless I can make more money, sorry. Like, I can't.
And I haven't made more than 35K since I got my degree. In fact, I made more money before I got my degree. I got my degree, and now I haven't made more than 35K since. And it's like with 35K, I make less than like 2,000 a month. There's
Yeah.
no way I can afford 1/4 of my income going to student loans. That's just not happening.
Mhm.
And
And it won't. It
even
won't,
when
period.
people don't verify my degree hasn't helped me. In fact, I think people have been looking and seeing what college I went to and went, yeah, you know what I mean? I think that's part of the reason why I haven't been able to get a job. Is because they see what college I went to and they're like, yeah, those were one of those for-profit colleges that we had in the early 2000s that all took people for a ride. Well, yes and no. I mean, I still took the classes and I still did the thing.
Yeah, I still put like a lot of hours and effort.
I put a ton of hours of effort into it. I did learn good stuff. The professors weren't bad professors.
I'm guessing they're still teaching just elsewhere.
They're teaching elsewhere. I've kept track of a couple of them, and in fact, it was actually kind of sad. I applied for a job as an adjunct teacher, and it turned out that the person in charge was one of my ex-professors, and he's like, "Look, guy, trust me, you don't want to do this job." He's like, "We could hire you. You have the qualifications. You don't want to do it. We pay nothing, and you'll be working a lot of hours." And he
So
was like,
in Japan, do they do free universities and colleges for their citizens?
so
Because in Germany they do.
Germany does,
colleges are free, like the state colleges are free. I think I'm not 100% sure because it seemed like all my kids were stressed out about aligning to good high schools to go to good colleges because that's why they wanted to go to good high schools, because if they didn't go to good high schools, some of those high schools just let you go work at McDonald's and that would be your graduation plan.
Dude,
And
that
some of
seems
the high
like
schools,
a lot.
graduation plan was high colleges. So it seems like the structure in Japan was which high school you went to. That's why they were all stressed out in 9th grade. All my 9th graders were totally stressed out.
It's been several years since I've looked into this, but Germany has a thing where all their public schools and universities are free. But as a citizen, you are expected to do a certain amount of service, whether it be in civil service or with the military. So
Which
it's
I
kind
don't
of
have a problem with at all.
Right,
That's
and it's
perfectly reasonable.
I mean,
I feel like that's a nice trade-off. You serve your country or your county,
and then they take care of you.
I mean, but that's part of like giving back. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about Germany, and it sounds like a really decent place to live because somebody moved over there and they were like, "Well, do you have car insurance yet?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've got car insurance. I've got health insurance." She's like, and the gal, like her boss or whatever, was like, "Oh, good, because that protects other people, not just you." Because it's protecting other people from debt and costs and problems.
Yeah.
And so it is more of a community thing. I feel like just in general, the reason why I keep looking at Europe is like they work less hours. They're a lot less stressed. They're a lot happier as people. In Spain, they take siesta. In Italy, they take all their meals with family, which is really sweet if they have it. They take time. And in America, it's work until you die.
Yeah, well, and that's a thing. I think that's probably the core problem I'm seeing right now with our culture is we spend a little too much time, but what about me? And not enough time, but what about everybody else?
Right. Well, and then a bunch of people band together and to bring it all back, try to game the system. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, but what about me?
Right.
What about my money?
And I mean, to be fair, I'm sitting here talking about my college degree and my yada, yada, yada as an illustration point. But I do feel like when you look at like Japan just, everybody put on their masks and they went on about their day. Nobody complained. Nobody sat there and said, but 32.9% of people don't work, and all this.
Well, but there were other problems, though, Guy. I mean, you still have to see that there were other problems, right? Like there was that South Korean cult that was in both Korea and Japan, trying to spread the disease as quickly as possible because it was the apocalypse time and it was time for their leader to rise.
Right.
So they had other crazy to deal with, but they still
They
had
certainly did, but that wasn't what I was talking about. What I'm saying is that the people of Japan just said, "Oh, so it's in everybody's best interest to wear masks." Okay,
yeah, but
and
they've
they-
done that. That's part of their culture.
right, and that's what I'm saying. Every culture that I can think of around the world, like Germany, like Japan, and those cultures all have a culture of protect your fellow man in
Mhm.
some way. And then you have the cultures like ours, and it's not just us, it's China's the same way to some degree. And it's people who have the classist system still going.
Russia,
I think the UK still pulls it off. from
the
time to
UK still pulls it off because they
And-
still have minorities and communities, and they still have a lot of racism.
and even Australia, to some degree, has this too. Although Australia, I think, is better. But it's this mentality of, well, it's just us, it's just me. So you do you, I'll do me, and I'll keep my gun pointed at you in case you decide to stop doing you and start trying to hurt me. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like that attitude means that I'll do whatever I want, and you do whatever you want, and we're good. But except you can't. And because I've had
It's
this
not
discussion a couple of
sustainable.
times with a couple of my friends, where I'm like, the problem isn't that. The problem is if you do whatever you want, you're hurting the rest of us.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, that's my right. And I'm like, no, it's not. But this is a free country. No, it's not. You're never allowed to hurt other people. You're
Yeah.
not allowed.
It's just
And even
that
if it's the
classic
Troy
rule.
rule, I now have a Troy rule, by the way. The Troy rule is even if it helps 5%, why not do it?
Mm.
That's
As long as it's not hurting.
Yeah,
right.
our big rule is don't damage people.
Right. But I
So-
mean, Troy's said this a couple of times in a couple of threads where it's been, but masks are only 20% effective. And Troy's like, yeah, and
Let's help those 20%.
better than 0%.
I don't want COVID.
I
Period.
don't
Point blank. End of story. I do not want it. I do not want to have a reduced lung capacity. I don't want to have random organ failure. I don't want to be sick. Frickin' period.
Well, and everybody I know who's had COVID, and even when they've had the milder symptoms, it's still like 3 weeks or 4 weeks that you're out of commission.
And I
I
have
don't want a month out. I can't afford a month
And
out.
it's not like it's not 3 or 4 weeks of vacation time. It's 3 or 4 weeks of flying around feeling like you wish you would die because all rationality has left your senses because you
So even if you
and
so
people should
miserable.
stay away from you, and you should be alone, completely isolated, because you could kill other people.
Right. But I mean, even if you assume, like all of these weird conspiracy theories that it doesn't really kill you, that all those numbers are made up in the hospitals, it only kills people who are 99 years old and older, whatever it is that they believe, the people that I have known that have had COVID that are my age have been ill for a week or for a month. They've been out of commission, lying in bed, wanting to die.
Mhm.
I don't want to do that.
I don't want that either. I don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. I don't want to be in a
Do all the
hospital.
things.
Like, never mind that I don't have insurance. I
Yeah.
don't want to be in a hospital. I don't want to be on a ventilator. I
The-
don't want to die.
That guy in Seattle who racked up $1 million in hospital bills from having COVID.
Now, mind you, they might get that figured out because he will push, and some social movement will likely happen around that because that is a lot. There was a story early on about a Colorado man who, I think he had a stroke in the middle of his COVID stay, and they had to reteach him how to walk and talk. And it took months. And they said that he was fine, and his insurance said, you're covered, this is fine. And then he got the bill, and they were like, well, we're going to lose the house and everything we own.
Yep.
And they did get it figured out, but it took time because there's so much bureaucracy around it anyway.
So we can't afford it.
No, nobody can afford it. Except those people
this is the
fighting on
worst
Wall Street.
nation on the planet to be sick in. This is not a good nation to be sick in.
Oh, no.
And so
It's
we
terrifying.
have a disease, and everybody's like, well, just go get the disease and get it over with. And I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. We can't afford it.
No.
We cannot afford
And,
it.
and there have been cases of people who have gotten it twice and 3 times. So just getting it doesn't mean you're all of a sudden immune to it.
Mhm. Yeah,
So-
and I've heard some people who are like, I'm not going to get vaccinated because I've already had it. And it's like, okay, but
The
you aren't
vaccine covers you
immune.
for getting it.
Mhm.
Well, and some people are scared because, I've had friends who have had COVID, first responders, and they've gotten the vaccination and they've been knocked down for the count for a couple days because their body is being reintroduced to the thing that knocked them out the first time.
Right.
So,
Well, and that's the
people are
thing.
going to start screaming about the vaccine too, being like, oh, it's going to kill you.
It's already
whatever the
happened.
virus does.
Be aware that
There's
the
so many
first
conspiracies.
dose hurts and the second dose takes you out for a day. However, that's better than a month and it's better than dead.
It's better than having a reduced lung capacity or possible organ failure or being on a
Or having a
ventilator
stroke,
or
having a
having
heart
a
attack.
stroke. Yeah.
Uh,
I prefer to be healthy and away from doctors, like as
Mhm.
far away as possible.
right.
The way to
I-
think about it is like wearing a seatbelt. A seatbelt is going to save your life. And you're like,
Mhm.
but it's going to wrinkle my clothes. Well, so's crashing. That's going to wrinkle your clothes too. Put your seatbelt on, you idiot.
Do you want 40K in unwrinkled clothes?
yeah. I mean, that's so. I mean, I'm
Or no, cars are way more expensive than 40K.
I'm waiting for my vaccine. I'm planning as soon as I get the vaccine. I'm not going to do my show the next day. I know I'm going to end up laying in bed all day. I'm already planning ahead.
I mean, at
I'm
this point,
noticing that it's
you
not
guys
just me.
we'll
Our
likely
game
get,
has been canceled Thursday as well for the same reason.
yeah. I
Joe,
think you guys will get vaccinated before I even will. And I'm an essential worker. They're
how
telling us,
would that happen? Because I'm in Group C, so there's no way I'll be vaccinated before.
are you in Group C? Okay, they were saying that they might move groups around, and so we got moved, and they said the soonest they'd probably vaccinate us at work would be June.
Yeah, see, you just got moved to Group C with me.
Essential worker.
The nice thing is, I think my wife has now been moved to a group that she will be on the schedule in February,
Yeah.
early
Well,
March.
they did shuffle the teachers around, which makes sense because teachers were supposed to go back to class, and it's like, why are you doing this before even the teachers and kids can get vaccinated? Like, what were you thinking?
Well, the kids can't get vaccinated because they haven't tested it on kids,
Mhm.
and that
Yeah.
makes total sense. That's okay. I get that. As long as all of us adults are vaccinated, strangely enough, I've made this comment before about why is it our TV shows all pander to kids? Kids only make up like I think it's only 1/5 of our population.
Still,
So-
kids were getting sick worse than adults
They were, but they're more resilient. They can handle it better and stuff like that. So I can at least understand kids going a little longer before
Mhm.
vaccinations. The truth is the highest at risk are people who are over 50, 60 years old.
Yeah.
So I get that.
I don't
But
know,
yeah,
it's a lot to me because, well, and maybe I just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? I haven't lost anyone due to
Yeah.
COVID.
well, that's what Troy and I were saying before
And I
the
keep
show.
waiting for the shoe to drop. I keep waiting.
We're both Troy and I are at second degree at this point. We know people who have lost people. We
Yeah.
haven't lost people. But what I was saying to Troy, I said, the problem is, and this is a couple of things that I'm very worried about, is Facebook has, of course, all this stuff with Facebook that's been going down. A lot of my conservative friends have left Facebook.
Yeah.
If they die from COVID, I won't know. The only way I'm ever going to find out that some of my friends that I've known for 30 or 40 years are dead is 20 years from now. And they're like, oh, you know that Bob died like 20 years ago from COVID, right? Because it's going to be back to that stage.
Yeah.
Once we no longer have Facebook to communicate with each other, then we're going to be back to that. Hey, did you hear that 12 years ago Joe died? And you'd be like, no.
I had a weird experience yesterday where I was just trying to like process. So my goddad and his wife, so my godmom by marriage, because they didn't know each other when I was a child, her mother's boyfriend just decided to end his life on Tuesday after them trying to convince him to not do so for a really long time.
Mm.
And
Sad.
she called me, and it was like the first time I had talked to her in probably a year.
Mhm.
It sounds so weird because she's my godmom, and I used to see her like all the time. So like, I guess my parents had been hanging out. My mom was like, you should call Chelsea because she's gonna want to know. And I was just sitting there like, I can't even process this because I haven't seen Bruce in probably 7 years. I haven't seen his wife in 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, and we're about to move back to that stage. One of the benefits that Facebook has offered us was the ability for all of us to talk to each other and be connected.
Yeah,
And
well, and they're not on Facebook like at all. So the only time I
Right.
hear from them is when they send a Christmas card or I get a call from their landline. And they
Well,
they still have like the solid landline, right? So if I'm really worried, I can call the landline for my godparents and be like, "You guys still okay?" But my
But I
mom
mean,
sees them every week, so it's like that trickle down, right? And people are so used to getting information like right away. You know, I'm hearing about this a week in rear because they're
Mhm.
still dealing with all of it, first of all, and they're just not those social creatures who are going to post everywhere. They're probably going to send out cards and say, "Here are plans. Here's how you can help," that kind of thing. So it's interesting to see how some information like I get directly from people like, you know, when I was worried about my COVID scare, we locked down and I just didn't talk to anybody or say that I had a potential exposure. I didn't reveal until I got my negative result. And then I was like, I'm negative for COVID. And oh my God, I was so scared because
Right.
I felt like I had symptoms because I was scared and my body was in shock. And I had to talk to my doctor about that. Like, it's
And that's the thing. That's what worries me about all of this. A lot of my family is very much on the right and the conservative side, and they're all starting to disappear off of Facebook because Facebook's liberal, and so yada yada yada. But that means that I'm back to not finding out the family members have passed until years later. I'll find out that the family members have passed on, years from now.
I
And
think that's another social issue that we have here in the US as well.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this a lot. Like, we've gone super way off track, but like the whole
Yeah.
nuclear family kind of thing, you know, with Tyler and I talking about leaving and moving to another country, a lot of people are like, oh, bring us with you, kind of a thing, right? And it would be nice to have a house full of people that I love and trust, that is not just like my actual blood family, but friends and relatives in a community that I can live in, like not a cult.
No,
So please don't say in the comments that I'm starting a cult. If I am, it's
no, but I mean, Greenwood was sort of that way.
But like, you know, being able to, I was talking to Emily because, you know, she's been talking about having kids for a long time and I have been dreading it partially, you know, and I was like, it would be nice to have kids together. I can't imagine going through that alone. I would want us to go through that together. But that's also very selfish, right? But like raising
Besides, I don't think you and Emily are biologically compatible.
They could adopt.
That's true.
They could find donors.
Yeah, we could find donors. Her brother, we could just grab some stuff from her brother. Or my
Stop.
brother.
Well, now
I feel like this has gone full stop on that one.
I was going to suggest make sure.
I'm going to Raz. I'm totally letting this opportunity to taunt Chelsea. Chelsea's like, hold my beer. Like, I'm going to make this awkward for Chelsea. Chelsea's like, here, have this beer. I'm going to do this awkward.
Like Emily and I had not had plans. I mean, seriously, like when her husband was dying, there was a plan that I was just going to marry her so that she didn't have to like lose her house and like make sure that we could pay for it and take care of everything if that happens. So
That's a sitcom idea right there.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to suggest you and Emily should draw straws, and one of you should like have your kid a year or two before the other, so that way they can pass down the clothing. Because it's
well. But here's the problem, though. Randy has all of Tyler and his older brother Brad's clothes. My mom still has some
Okay.
of my stuff and even some of her stuff as a kid, so we'll be fine. My friends Joe and Laura, who have their 1-year-old, they are keeping stuff that has been passed down to them. So the community is there for me or her.
Which works just fine. We are extraordinarily appreciative of Troy, who constantly does that all the time. He's like, well, everybody's outgrown stuff. Here's a box of stuff. And my kid then takes those and then he's wearing those.
Mm-hmm.
And it works because all of Troy's kids and my kids seem to be in the same likes and they seem to be in the same culture.
Nerds.
They're all nerds. And so everything that comes down the pike, my kid loves. Because he's like, oh yeah, this is Minecraft shirt. I'm into that, whatever.
I had the same thing too when my parents raised us in a babysitting co-op that was found through their church, and the only reason they stayed with the church is because all of the babysitting co-op was there, and vice versa. Like they were all just staying for each other until they stopped going.
Speaking
And
of
then-
cults, sorry.
Right though. So I was raised with like 8 other people's kids, and occasionally we just swap clothing, like. And it's funny because Emily and I have talked about this as well. Like Emily was getting rid of a bunch of stuff. She's like, I've picked out a bunch of stuff I think you'll like, but you can go through the whole basket. And of course, everything she picked out, I liked. And now I'm going through all my stuff and picking out the stuff she'll like, so that we can just swap clothing. Like, screw it. It doesn't matter. I don't need new things, right? And so we've just been passing clothing kind of back and forth. Whenever we're like, do you have that Spider-Man hoodie? Like, I kind of miss that hoodie. I was like, oh yeah, I don't even wear it, Chuck. Done.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like that's extremely useful. I don't know where we were going on that one. We
were talking about GameStop.
Yeah.
We were talking about GameStop.
And then we were
We
talking
started
about,
this by talking about
and
GameStop.
then so much politics. Oh
And,
my God.
Well,
In our meeting beforehand, Chelsea wanted to talk about food. We haven't even gotten to that.
No.
yeah, well, and it's as far as politics goes, I was thinking, gosh, we try not to talk politics in the show, but then I realized we've done this more than once.
We have.
I mean,
Not quite to this level.
No, definitely
Yeah.
not.
I mean,
But I think
we went ahead right after Trump was elected. I remember us sitting down and having a whole show about that.
do we?
I don't remember a show about it. I remember.
It wasn't Chelsea. Chelsea wasn't there. I remember us discussing it, and I remember us being in a Wendy's or something like.
Are you sure it was a show though?
No, I'm pretty sure if we went back 4 years, we'd find that we had done something.
I'm trying to
season
remember,
2.
like,
Because it was before Chelsea. Chelsea joined us during these last. It was like just before we got Chelsea.
okay. I'm like, what color hair did I
remember us
have?
discussing it. Right. That's
And
how
I
we tell
remember
where
us
we were
being
with Chelsea is what
in
color her hair
like
was.
a Wendy's or something like that.
Which
Which
is
is it was a show.
true.
Though? Yeah, we try. I'd like
No,
to try to
I'm pretty
avoid it
sure
just
if we
because
went
of how
back
some
4
people
years, we'd
polarize
find
and
we had done
trying to
something.
get people to depolarize and
Yeah,
realize
yeah.
that
Because
not
it was before Chelsea.
you don't
joined
have
us
100%
during
options on
these
every side.
last- It was like just
That's why I was
Chelsea's
judging.
frozen.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm
she might
like,
have frozen.
what
I feel like
color
she's
hair did I
even
have?
more interestingly, she's
Right.
frozen like that's how we tell where
Yeah.
we were with Chelsea is what color her
We
hair
did
was.
lose her earlier.
Um,
or something.
which is-
No, we
Which
only
I-
have 2 Chelseas just because of how some
We have
people
Chelsea.
polarize.
And
I hope
Frozen
you don't
just-
have double
we had done
stout
trying to
because
get people
my
to
computer shut down
depolarize and realize
for
that
no
No,
apparent
before
reason.
Chelsea.
you
You
don't
don't
have
have
100% options on every side.
I'm trying to decide whether we want to
That's why it's
Chelsea that's like stuck
Okay.
going.
Oh, she might have frozen. Oh, she left
See,
already.
Chelsea has made the
What
decision
color
for me.
hair?
Yeah, I did.
It's like
done.
you do not get to sit there and make fun of me. Yes, we
So I was
do.
just saying, I like to avoid
Only
it
because we love you, and that's the only real reason.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I need to take my computer to Geek Squad at this point. I think there's a RAM issue.
There might be, but I was just thinking about that
Exactly.
too. You were saying family. That's something I've been thinking an awful lot about. The family you choose versus the family you have.
Mm-hmm.
Because like Troy and you are family to me. They're like seriously, like I'm into the teasing and taunting you guys, which is something I don't do to normal people. Because you guys are family, and it's like, and that's a big difference between like sometimes I think about some of the people who are literally blood related to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then, somebody was talking to me the other day about the land. We still have the land that my grandfather was born on, and
wow.
So between the,
and it's out in Lovelady, Texas, and my whole family owns a section of it, and we've all agreed not to sell it for any reason or whatever. And every so often somebody calls and asks to buy it, and I'm like, yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot off of this. And I said, here's the history of this land, and I went through the entire history of what happened on that land. And I was like, and of course my sister starts laughing at me. She's like, well, he did sort of ask for that, didn't he? Because of course it's like Troy makes jokes about it, you don't get a 5-minute explanation. But for me, I feel like it's very important to have the history of my family, and it's very important to have connection to my family. But I also think it's important to have connection to the family that isn't blood related. Like you guys. You guys are.
There comes a point where, there are people everywhere who you will not get along with. Like one of my blood relative great uncle, who was just pissed about the gays, and 2 of his children are gay. Like,
right.
At some point I just stopped thinking about him. Like, he's long dead. Good riddance. Bye. I like my uncles more,
Right.
Just because like you are blood related doesn't mean you necessarily need to get along or like each other. And a lot of people really hold on to these specific connections just because they're like, well, this is my family member, I have to make excuses. Like, you don't have to make any excuses for them. You can just stop talking to them if they're horrible people or they treat you horribly. Goodbye.
Yeah.
It's not difficult.
And it's normal for us to have a structure that people can't get over. It seems to be, I feel like in general, our culture is getting better with every generation, but we have to break something every generation to get us to a point where we can just accept people for who they are. And it's hard because we're having a process on this. I was talking the other day about people who were talking about the first interracial kiss on Star Trek. And they were saying, people on that particular thread were saying it's interesting because the season before, Kirk had kissed Barbara Luna, who is Filipino. So why, so obviously Kirk kissing Uhura was not the first interracial kiss. And I said, you don't remember how the South was in 1967. Barbara Luna was Asian, and that makes her fine. She's white. It wasn't about race like it is now. Everything has changed. Our society has changed. Our view of what racial discrimination has changed. In the 60s, it was about being dirty, and they thought Black people were really dirty, like gross. And I said, that's a different view on things. We've luckily abandoned that part. Now the racial discrimination is different. But that Jim Crow racism, that was horrible, and it was terrible. And we've ejected it.
well,
We've got a new version we got to get over. But
I think some of the horrible old stuff is still there. It's just because we're white, we aren't the victims of it, so we don't see it as much. But it's definitely better.
It's no longer acceptable. It's no longer acceptable in common.
More and more people are saying no to this, saying this is the wrong. Your brain's not working right. Fix it.
Whereas in the 60s, that was just accepted and given.
Mm.
You could do that as long as you were in certain areas where it was permitted. It's kind of like smoking. A lot of people are like, well, smoking's probably not good for you, but it's okay if Bob over here smokes, sort of thing.
To stop giving people agency to do shit like that.
Right.
Like, that's all you got to do is stop the agency.
Agency for it. And every generation, like, it's unheard of for our generation to be particularly racist anymore because Gen X was on that forefront. But then homosexuality was sort of, I don't know, weird. And it was difficult for us. So we had to, as Gen X, we had to break homosexuality.
Well, during our early years, it was also the peak of being made fun of on television. It was the butt of a joke.
Right, exactly. And now we have transsexuals as this on this forefront. that we're trying to work through. Each generation seems to have a newer and different way of and we seem to be hedging towards just accept people for who they are.
Well, accept people for who they are, be kind and respectful, and let them succeed.
Right. Well, I remember when I was younger, like in my 20s, one of my close and dear friends is gay, and he and I were talking one time, and I was just in a fit of frustration. I was saying, I just hope someday they find out that homosexuality is genetic or something, so that people can stop blaming homosexuals for it as a choice. And he said, you know what? It should be okay to be a choice too. It's like people choosing to discriminate against you because you're a Trekkie. That's not acceptable either. And I was like, it was like a mind blown moment for me. I hadn't even thought of that, but it's totally true. And that changed my dynamic and changed my entire thought process. Yeah, you can choose to be a Trekkie. That's fine. You can choose, even if homosexuality is a choice, that should be allowed.
Well, and you can choose it for a little bit and maybe decide that it's not for you as well. Like, a lot of people like to do oh, this is just a phase, right? Like when you listen to your punk, rocker, emo music with all your eyeliner on at 15 because you're just punishing yourself and you hate the world, right? Like, let that happen.
Let it happen.
Somebody who's like, I think I'm gay. I'm like, I think you're not. No, just let them. Like,
if it
people trying to trade stocks on Wall Street, like, I think I know how this works and you should fix this. No, you don't. Like, let people do the thing and don't punish them when they change their mind.
And it's because we're all afraid we're going to lose our culture if we all don't conform.
We have culture. What culture?
And that's the thing, is we haven't built flexibility into our culture, except we have. People are afraid we haven't built flexibility into our culture. It's the reason why people don't like Mexicans. It's the reason why people don't like the Chinese, because they're afraid that that's going to infiltrate the culture and wipe out our culture. And I'm like, our culture is a melting pot. It always has been. Our culture is a little bit of everything.
Something I recommend people that are listening look up to, and we don't have nearly enough time to go into this, look up the paradox of tolerance, because we want to be as tolerant as possible, but the thing we can't tolerate, and this is the paradox, is we can't tolerate intolerance.
Right.
So, and then I was also going to mention, before we go, I want to make sure, since you brought this up earlier, Chelsea, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. If you know of someone that you think's having a hard time, or if you yourself are having a hard time, reach out. It's totally fine to ask for help. There's nothing wrong for that. There's this stigma in society trying to say something's wrong if you feel depressed. No, it's hard to say you're wrong if you feel depressed. You're not wrong if you feel depressed. You need to get the help that you deserve, and you deserve help.
And the warning signs are things like feeling like, why do I want to go on tomorrow, or this hurts too much to go on tomorrow. Those are warning signs. So reach out, give people a call. If you feel like that way, post in the comments right here.
Nothing, or you can private message us and we'll make a phone call for you.
Yeah, message would be better. It's a little more delicate that way. I just feel like it's a little more personal with a private message than having everybody comment.
I'm willing to concede that that's a better choice.
And but then, so I just want to throw that in there real quick before we wrap up.
Thank you. No, that hotline is legitimately a lifesaver. So if you need it, use it. There's always somebody there.
They know how to deal with it, and it's not, you're not wrong, you're not bad. That's the big thing. And you're not alone.
Definitely.
So, okay, on that depressing note, we've run out of time.
We've been sponsored by.
This show's been sponsored by. Let's bring up the sponsors while we can. Except I can't find my mouse. God damn it!
Next week.
Well, I can't bring them up. I'm on a cell phone now.
Yeah, when you lean back, you look like from Beetlejuice when the guy gets his head shrunk in the waiting room. because your body's like all disproportionate and your head's really tiny.
Yeah, because you're like
It's like a fish
camera
island.
dramatic. You had your arms up like this, and the arms are like huge.
Yeah, it's just because of the tiny little like fish islands.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now you're
It's-
crushing your own head.
Now you're crushing your own head. Okay, so Geek Tank is sponsored by Kieran Games, Geekway Home, Shiny Garden, and your mom. Okay, we're gonna see you all next week. We're gonna keep trying to do this on Sunday so that we can put the show out on Thursdays so that we can keep Chelsea, whom we love a lot, in our show. It actually is kind of a bummer to lose her. So anyway,
Until your work shift changes.
until your work
Yeah.
shift changes, you'll probably still just have just Troy and me in the chat room with you guys. So join us in the chat room. That'll be
Probably
cool.
should have said that at the beginning of the show.
Well, next week,
Yeah, probably
next week,
until like
Edit it.
we'll edit. We'll put that in the beginning of the post.
in April, maybe. I think that's when my schedule is going to change a little bit more, and I'm going to have more of the weekdays off and then just work weekends. So
It'll work. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. And thank you very much for joining us. And like and subscribe, and you'll know that when we're coming back next week. In the meantime, I've been Guy,
I've been Troy.
And I've been Chelsea.
and this is Geek Tank.